Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're embarking on a really fascinating journey, I think. We're going deep into what wealth really means in America.
Yeah, and we're going to challenge pretty much every popular idea you might have about millionaires, who they are, and maybe more importantly, how they actually got there.
Exactly. We're drawing on some extensive research here, studies that profiled financially independent Americans over quite a number of years. So this isn't just guesswork.
No, not at all. And this isn't about the super rich you see in magazines of billionaires. Our sources give us, a much clearer and more actionable picture. It's about how regular, albeit high-performing, Americans achieve financial independence.
And there's one core idea we need to establish right up front, isn't there?
Absolutely. It's the foundation for everything else we'll discuss. It sounds simple, but it gets ignored so often, especially by people earning good money. Wealth is fundamentally what you accumulate, not what you spend.
Accumulate, not spend.
Okay, right. Having a high income is just, potential. It doesn't automatically turn into wealth. Think of it like potential energy.
That makes sense. And the goal of this deep dive is really to find the common threads, the lifestyle denominators of people who successfully build wealth, often within just one generation.
Exactly. And what the research points to isn't complex financial wizardry. It's things like hard work, perseverance, planning, really detailed planning, and maybe above all, self-discipline.
And when you look at the bigger picture, the numbers are kind of staggering. The sources cite data from the mid-90s showing over $22 trillion in personal wealth in the U.S.
A huge number.
Huge. But here's the kicker. Nearly half of that massive amount was owned by just 3.5% of households.
Wow. So 3.5% held almost half the wealth.
Yeah. It really confirms that most people, even those earning well and feeling successful, aren't actually wealthy. They might just be high-income consumers.
And that's the group we're not focusing on today. We're looking at the segment where building wealth is actually achievable within a working lifetime.
The attainable millionaires.
Right. The ones who make up about 95% of all millionaires in the U.S., typically with a net worth between, say, $1 million and $10 million. These are the people whose habits we can actually learn from and potentially replicate.
Okay, so those core principles again were hard work, perseverance, planning, and self-discipline. Sounds almost basic.
It does, doesn't it? It's not about risky schemes or complex derivatives. It's fundamental blocking and tackling, financially speaking.
Before we dig into the how, we really need to address the who. What does this typical millionaire actually look like? Because I think the image most people have is way off.
That is exactly the right place to start. Because maybe the biggest mental block to building wealth is feeling like you have to look rich long before you actually are rich.
The pressure to keep up appearances.
Precisely. The typical American image of a millionaire. It's all about high-status consumption. The sources use this great example. They call it the trust officer type.
Ugh. The trust officer. Yeah, I can picture him. Sharp dresser, right. Expensive suit, probably custom tailored. Maybe a fancy watch, like $5,000 or something, which was a huge amount back then.
Astronomical, yeah. And driving the latest model imported luxury car. Probably leased too, so they always have the newest, shiniest thing. This person just screams money. Society sees that and thinks, success.
But the research paints a completely different picture. The actual millionaire next door.
Completely different. Take the example of Mrs. T and her husband from the study.
Yeah.
Her watch, a Timex.
A Timex, okay.
His, a Seiko, which, interestingly, was the most popular watch brand among the millionaires surveyed. Why? Because it's reliable and, inexpensive. It just tells time.
No status symbol needed. What about clothes?
Department stores.
Yeah.
Discount retailers. Places like JCPenney, Dillard's, TJ Maxx. Good quality, maybe, but definitely not designer labels.
And their home, because that's often the biggest status symbol.
You'd think so, but no. The average home value for the millionaires in the study was around $320,000. Now remember, this is mid-90s data that bought a comfortable, solid home in a decent neighborhood, but certainly not a sprawling mansion in the most exclusive zip code.
And they tended to stay put, right?
For decades, often 20 years or more in the same house. That allows for huge passive appreciation, minimizes transaction costs, and crucially, keeps their overhead low. The most important thing is they were financially independent. They could live for years without earning another dime.
That contrast is just stark, the flashy trust officer versus the Seiko-wearing JCPenney shopper.
It really is. And it brings us to that fantastic Texan saying the sources mentioned, big hat, no cattle.
Ah, yes, big hat, no cattle. Love that. Describes the high-income person who looks wealthy, the big hat, but has very little actual accumulated net worth, no cattle.
Exactly. It perfectly captures that high-income consumer trap.
Let's talk about that Texan anecdote, the diesel engine rebuilder. That really nails it.
It does. He was a self-made guy, very successful international business. But how did he present himself? He drove a 10-year-old car, wore jeans, lived in a modest area.
And his business partners from the UK came to visit.
And they completely mistook him for one of his own truck drivers. They walked right past him, looking for the important owner.
That must have been awkward.
He apparently just laughed it off. He told them something like, "Look, I don't own big hats, but I have a lot of cattle." His net worth was substantial, but his consumption was practically invisible.
The lesson being, playing the part isn't just unnecessary, it actually gets in the way of building the cattle, the real wealth.
It actively hinders it. Every dollar spent on the big hat is a dollar not invested in the cattle.
So let's paint a clearer picture of this prototypical millionaire based on the demographics. Who are we actually talking about?
The profile that emerges from the data is remarkably consistent. Typically, a 57-year-old male, married.
Okay, 57 married.
And here's a really crucial statistic. A whopping 80% are first-generation affluent.
80%. So they didn't inherit it.
Nope, they built it themselves. Usually it was a slow, steady process over maybe 20, 30 years, not overnight lottery winners.
What kind of work do they do? We might imagine Wall Street types or tech moguls.
That's the myth again, the reality. 2/3 of the working millionaires in the study were self-employed, entrepreneurs or professionals like doctors, accountants.
Self-employed. Okay, that's interesting.
But the types of businesses are often what the sources call dull normal.
Dull normal. Like what?
Think welding contractors, pest control services, auctioneers, rice farmers, mobile home park owners. Solid, necessary businesses, often quite profitable, but generally low status, low glamour.
Which probably helps them avoid that pressure to spend, right? Less visibility.
Exactly. The dull normal's advantage. Less need to impress, less temptation to buy the big hat. Now, educationally, they're generally well educated. About 80% are college graduates. Many have advanced degrees.
Okay, so education is common.
Yes, but look at their financial snapshot. It reinforces that frugal approach. Median net worth, $1.6 million.
Median.
Okay, their median realized annual income, only $131,000. The average is higher, around $247,000, but that gets skewed upwards by a few very high earners in the sample.
$131,000 median income on a $1.6 million median net worth. That's not a huge drawdown.
It's tiny. The critical point is they live, on average, on less than 7% of their total wealth each year.
Less than 7%.
Yeah. The rest is working for them, compounding, accumulating.
So if you have, say, $2 million in net worth, you're living on maybe $140,000 or less per year. That requires serious discipline when you know you have millions sitting there.
Immense discipline. And their housing choices reflect that too. 97% are homeowners, average value $320,000, often in the same house for over 20 years, as we said. Cars, mostly American-made, only a minority drive the current model year. Very few lease, they just live well below their means.
But you mentioned one area where they do spend, their children's education.
Yes. This is a key distinction.
Right.
Over half, 55%, send their kids to private schools. They spend significantly on their offspring's education.
So they're frugal with themselves, the watches, the cars, the clothes, but not with their kids' future.
Exactly. They see education not as consumption, but as an investment in their children's ability to become self-reliant and independent themselves. They'll invest capital to equip their kids, even if they won't splurge on a $500 pair of shoes for themselves. It reveals their core values.
That focus on accumulation versus consumption is really the dividing line. And the sources give us a great tool to measure this, right? The wealth equation.
Yes, it's a really neat, simple way to benchmark where you stand relative to your peers in terms of wealth building. It helps you see if you're punching above or below your weight, financially speaking.
So how does it work?
It's straightforward. Your expected net worth is your age multiplied by your total annual realized income, then divided by 10.
Okay, let's do an example. Say you're 45 years old, earning $100,000 a year.
Right. So 45 times 100,000 is 4.5 million. Divide that by 10. Your expected net worth, statistically speaking, for your age and income is $450,000.
$450,000. So if you're around that mark, you're average.
Pretty much average, yeah. Now, here's where the categories come in. If your actual net worth is roughly twice that expected value, or more so, in our example, $900,000 or higher, you're classified as a PAW. Prodigious accumulator of wealth. You're doing an excellent job turning income into wealth.
Okay, PAW. prodigious accumulator. Got it.
Whooper, what's the flip side? If your net worth is only half or less than the expected value, so $225,000 or less, in our example, you're a UAW.
UAW, under accumulator of wealth.
Exactly, under accumulator of wealth. You might have a good income, but you're not effectively converting it into lasting net worth. And the difference is, huge pause, typically accumulate at least 4 times the wealth of UAWs in the same income and age brackets, sometimes much, much more.
4 times or more. That's a massive gap.
It really is. And the case studies in the book bring this to life. Let's compare 2 individuals. First, Mr. Miller, Bubba Richards. He's a mobile home dealer.
Okay, Bubba, the mobile home dealer.
Age 50, income around $90,200. Using the formula, his expected net worth should be about $451,000.
Right. 50 times 90,200 divided by 10. Yep, $451K.
But his actual net worth, $1.1 million.
Wow. More than double the expectation.
Clear paw.
Oh.
He lived modestly, invested consistently. Now, compare him to James H. Ford II, an attorney.
Okay, Mr. Ford, the attorney, probably higher status, more education.
Yep. Age 51, so similar age. Slightly higher income, actually $92,330. His expected net worth should be around $470,883.
Okay, slightly higher expectation.
But his actual net worth was only $226,511.
Ouch. Less than half the expectation.
A definitive UAW. Think about that. The mobile home dealer, with arguably less social status and 7 fewer years of formal education, ended up with nearly 5 times the wealth of the attorney despite similar ages and income.
What explains that huge difference? It has to be spending, right?
It's almost entirely lifestyle and spending habits.
Yeah.
Mr. Ford, the attorney, felt he had to maintain a certain image. The expensive car lease, the tailored suits, the country club membership, the upscale home furnishings, all that overhead associated with a successful professional persona.
The big hat.
Exactly. UAWs consistently prioritize consumption and display. PAWs prioritize the balance sheet, accumulation.
But surely with that attorney income, couldn't Mr. Ford catch up eventually?
That's the insidious nature of the UAW trap. Once you establish that high consumption lifestyle, it becomes incredibly difficult psychologically to scale back.
Yeah.
The spending habits become ingrained.
Right, your baseline just keeps rising.
Precisely. And this gets magnified dramatically when you look at very high income earners. The sources compare 2 physicians, Dr. South and Dr. North. Both had similar, very high incomes.
Okay, Dr. South versus Dr. North.
Dr. South is our UAW. Despite his high income, he'd only accumulated about $400,000 in net worth. He was a hyper-consumer.
How bad was it?
Get this. He was spending $107,000 a year just on mortgage payments.
$107,000 on mortgage alone.
Plus another $47,900 annually on club memberships.
Wow, that's over $150K just on house and clubs.
And he admitted he was constantly worried about earning enough to keep up with his family's spending habits. His high income bought him high status, but also high stress.
Okay, so what about Dr. North, the PAW?
Same high income, vastly different outcome. Dr. North had accumulated $7.5 million in net worth.
$7.5 million compared to $400K. Incredible.
And look at his overhead. Mortgage payments, only $14,600 a year. Club dues, $8,000. Minimal compared to Dr. South.
So Dr. North had financial peace of mind.
Exactly. He had virtually no financial worries. His wealth base was secure. He wasn't stressed about maintaining a standard of living because his standard of living was well within his means, supported by a massive asset base. Dr. South, despite the high income, could never buy that peace.
This leads to a really counterintuitive point the research makes about education, especially advanced degrees.
Ah, yes, the advanced degree paradox is fascinating. The data showed that for high-income earners, people making $100K or more, the correlation between having advanced degrees, like law, medical, or other graduate degrees, and actual wealth accumulation was often negative.
Negative? How can that be? More education usually means higher income potential.
It does, but think about the path. Professionals often start earning later in life because of all the schooling. They frequently carry significant student debt. And then society and their peers expect them to look successful immediately.
The pressure to have the right car, the right house, join the right clubs.
Exactly. They get forced into a high-cost lifestyle, high domestic overhead, right from the start to validate their professional status.
So the very thing that unlocks the high income, the degree, simultaneously locks them into a high consumption pattern that prevents wealth building.
That's the cruel irony. The sources specifically point out that doctors, as a group, tend to have a surprisingly low propensity to accumulate substantial wealth compared to other high-income groups, precisely because that social pressure to maintain the high-status image is so intense. They become status symbols expected to buy new, expensive things, draining their ability to invest.
Okay, so if UAWs are trapped by consumption, PAWs must be masters of defense. Frugality, planning.
That's exactly what the sources call it, the Great Defense. And it's often a team effort. Remember, 95% of the millionaires studied were married. While often one spouse, typically the male back then, generated most of the income, played great offense, the couple together had to execute great defense. That means frugality.
And this wasn't just occasional saving, it was ingrained in their behavior.
Absolutely. Look at their purchasing habits. The majority of these millionaires had never spent $5,000 on a watch. Half of them had never spent more than $140 on a pair of shoes.
$140 for shoes. Even back then, that's pretty modest for someone with millions.
Very modest. And suits. The typical self-made millionaire spent around $360 on a suit. Compare that to inheritors of wealth who felt comfortable spending over $600.
That self-made versus inheritor difference keeps popping up. The ones who earned it treat it differently.
They respect the dollar no matter how many they have. They're not using expensive clothes or accessories to signal competence. Their track record, their business success, does that for them.
And the spouse is key here too, right? You mentioned it's a team effort.
Critically important. The study found that while the PAWs themselves were frugal, their spouses were often even more frugal.
Even more frugal. Wow.
There's this amazing anecdote about a millionaire who took his company public, became incredibly wealthy overnight, and gave his wife $8 million worth of company stock.
$8 million. What was her reaction?
She thanked him, of course, but then immediately went right back to the kitchen table to clip 50 cents off grocery coupons.
No way! After getting $8 million.
Yep. It wasn't about needing the 50 cents anymore. It was about a deeply ingrained habit, a fundamental respect for money as capital to be preserved, not wasted. It's the ultimate defense mindset.
That's incredible. It's a value system. And this defense isn't just about saying no to spending, it's also about planning.
Meticulous planning. Unlike UAWs who often spend first and then wonder where the money went, PAWs run their households like a business. And a key tool for that is budgeting.
Do most millionaires actually budget? I thought maybe they wouldn't need to.
You'd think so, but the data says otherwise. For every 100 millionaires who don't budget, there are 120 who do. They operate on an annual household budget. That gives them a massive advantage in controlling outflows.
Knowing where the money is going, that seems like a basic but crucial difference.
It is. Almost 2/3 of the millionaires surveyed knew exactly how much they spent annually on the big three: food, clothing, and shelter. Compare that to high-income non-millionaires. Only about 35% of them could give you that level of detail.
If you don't track it, you can't control it. Makes sense.
Simple but powerful.
What about the millionaires who don't follow a strict line item budget? How do they manage it?
They often use a different but equally disciplined strategy. Pay yourself first, but on steroids.
Pay yourself first, meaning saving before spending?
Exactly. But they do it aggressively. They create what the sources call an artificial environment of scarcity. They mandate investing a minimum slice of their income, typically at least 15%, before any other bills get paid or spending happens.
So they lock away the savings first, automatically.
Right. That 15% or more investment is non-negotiable. It takes priority over everything else. It effectively forces their spending capacity to be smaller than their earning capacity, ensuring accumulation happens systematically.
That discipline extends to credit cards, too, I imagine. The data there must be telling.
Oh, it's a perfect illustration. Remember Dr. South's high-income, low-wealth neighbors, Robert and Judy? They were juggling 14 different credit cards and felt completely overwhelmed by consumer debt. Classic UAW behavior.
14 cards. Yikes.
Now, contrast that with the millionaires. They use credit cards, sure, mostly for convenience. Visa and MasterCard were common, around 56–59%.
Standard utility card.
Right. But here's the really revealing part. What about status cards versus store cards?
Ah, the Amex Platinum versus the Sears card.
Exactly. High-status cards like American Express Platinum or Diners Club were incredibly rare among these millionaires, like 6% for Platinum, 3% for Diners Club.
So they weren't chasing points or airport lounge access.
Apparently not. What was surprisingly popular? Store cards. Sears card, held by 43% of them. J.C. Penney card, over 30%.
Sears and Penney's cards were more popular than Amex Platinum.
Far more popular. What that tells you, loud and clear, is that the typical self-made millionaire consistently prioritizes value and budgeting over status signaling. They shop where they get the best deal, not where they look the most impressive. Checking out. Hashtag tags PV. Status traps and the cost of living high.
That value-seeking behavior must carry over into big-ticket items, especially cars. Cars are notorious wealth destroyers.
They certainly can be. Depreciating assets, high running costs. Now, the overall split was interesting. About 63% of the millionaires surveyed actually bought their cars new.
Oh, really? I might have guessed more bought used.
About 37% bought used. But the real insight comes when you break down their buying behavior further. The sources identify a specific group called the used vehicle-prone shopper. They make up about 20% of the millionaire sample.
The used vehicle-prone shopper, okay, what defines them?
These are the ultimate value hunters when it comes to cars. They are extremely price-sensitive. They don't just walk in and buy. They often spend months researching, comparing, looking for the absolute best possible deal. And they negotiate hard.
Months of shopping for a used car. That takes dedication.
It does, but here's the payoff. This specific group, the obsessive used car bargain hunters, had the highest wealth-to-income ratio of any group in the entire study.
The highest, more than the ones buying new.
Significantly higher. They had $17.20 of net worth for every $1 of realized annual income. Their average incomes were actually lower than some other millionaire groups, but their net worth was often higher, frequently exceeding $3 million.
Wait, so being incredibly careful and patient about buying a used car correlates with having the most wealth relative to income.
That's what the data shows. It proves pretty definitively that playing strong defense, meticulous shopping, aggressive negotiating, refusing to overpay, even for depreciating assets, is arguably a more powerful driver of wealth accumulation than simply having a high income.
That completely flips the script. And it highlights another strange finding, doesn't it, about who actually negotiates.
It does. Logically, you'd think people with less money would be the most likely to haggle and shop around for deals.
Right, because every dollar matters more.
But the research found the opposite. Non-wealthy buyers were significantly less likely to shop around, compare prices, and negotiate than the millionaires were.
Why would that be?
The sources suggest several reasons. Maybe they lack the time or the financial knowledge, or maybe it's psychological, they lack the confidence or courage to negotiate, feeling it's confrontational or somehow beneath them. Whatever the reason, it costs them wealth.
That fear of looking cheap or feeling too important to haggle, it's another form of the status trap.
It absolutely is. And it leads us directly to the biggest, most insidious status trap of all, the high-status neighborhood. Choosing where you live can literally make or break your ability to accumulate wealth, especially if you're a high-income UAW.
Okay, break down the economics of living in that fancy zip code.
Let's think about who lives there. Doctors, lawyers, executives. Now, we know the millionaires in the study, on average, realized only about 6.7% of their wealth as income each year to live on.
Okay, 6.7% of their net worth covered their annual expenses.
Right. But their non-affluent neighbors, the ones earning good salaries but not yet wealthy, living in those same expensive houses, the study estimated they had to realize more than 40% of their net worth each year just to cover the cost of living there.
40%, compared to less than 7% for the actual millionaire.
Exactly. The non-affluent person in the fancy neighborhood is basically liquidating a huge chunk of their potential future wealth every year just to pay the massive mortgage, the high property taxes, the country club dues, the private school tuition. All the things expected in that environment.
They're running on a financial treadmill just to stay in place.
Precisely. And often, they bought the expensive house in anticipation of becoming wealthy, not after achieving it. This forces them into a terrible cycle.
How so?
They have to maximize their realized income each year just to make ends meet. This means taking salary over deferred compensation, maybe avoiding tax-efficient investments. Maximizing realized income also maximizes their annual tax burden.
So they're paying more in taxes and have less left over to invest because they chose the expensive address.
Correct. They end up financially fragile, maybe living paycheck to paycheck despite a high income, permanently stuck consuming rather than accumulating. They've traded future financial independence for present-day neighborhood status.
It really makes you question the whole location, location, location mantra, at least from a wealth-building perspective. What about the argument that you need to live in certain areas for networking or clients?
That's a common justification, especially for professionals. But this data strongly suggests that the cost of that high-status address often outweighs any potential networking benefits when it comes to actual net worth accumulation. True wealth building seems to require resisting those very social norms about where you should live based on your income or profession.
So the research offers a guideline here, a rule of thumb.
Yes, a very clear, actionable rule based on the financial reality of the pause. If your goal is to become wealthy, never purchase a home that requires a mortgage more than twice your household's total annual realized income.
Mortgage no more than 2 times annual income. That's a very conservative rule compared to what banks often approve.
Much more conservative,
Yeah.
but it acts as a firewall against that status neighborhood trap. It forces you to live below your means from the start.
There was that stockbroker example, right? Earning 84Ks, wanting a $310K house.
Exactly. His advisor, using this data, told him it was too much house. The mortgage would be way over twice his income.
And the stockbroker's reaction?
He flat out rejected the advice. His reason, he didn't want to live in a neighborhood with, and I quote, truckers and construction workers.
Wow. So he prioritized perceived social standing over financial prudence.
He explicitly chose higher debt, higher financial stress, and a lower probability of ever achieving true financial independence, simply to avoid the perceived social stigma of living in a more modest, affordable neighborhood. That psychological barrier needing your address to match your professional status is precisely what the pause overcome and the UAW succumb to. Okay, moving beyond individual discipline and neighborhood choices, there's another huge factor influencing wealth: family dynamics. Specifically, something the sources call economic outpatient care, or EOC.
EOC, economic outpatient care, sounds almost clinical. What does it mean?
It refers to substantial financial gifts and other forms of economic support, acts of kindness. The book calls them that affluent parents give to their adult children and grandchildren.
So parents helping out their grown kids financially seems like a nice thing to do.
On the surface, yes. And it's incredibly common. The study found that more than 46% of affluent households give at least $15,000 a year in EOC.
15,000 or more. What kinds of things count as EOC?
All sorts. Paying for grandkids' private school tuition, that was 43% of EOC givers. Helping with grad school costs for adult kids, 32%. Providing significant financial help for buying a first home, almost 60% did that. Down payments, closing costs, that kind of thing.
Okay, so it's widespread and involves substantial amounts. But why is it presented as a potential problem?
Because the data reveals what the researchers call the EOC paradox. It's counterintuitive but statistically robust.
What's the paradox?
Two things. First, parents who provide regular EOC end up with significantly less wealth themselves compared to their affluent peers whose adult children are economically independent. Giving away money reduces your own nest egg, obviously.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the other part?
This is the really striking part. Adult children who receive more EOC tend to accumulate less wealth themselves over their lifetime. And often, they even end up earning lower annual incomes compared to their peers who didn't receive such subsidies.
Wait, getting free money makes you less wealthy and earn less income. How does that work?
It seems to function like a crutch. It prevents the adult children from developing the financial discipline, the frugality, the resilience, and the drive necessary for achieving independence on their own.
It dampens their own ambition or skills?
It appears so. Look at the case study of Lamar and Mary. Lamar was an administrator, Mary a housewife. Their combined earned income never topped $60,000.
Okay, modest income.
Yet they lived a classic upper-middle-class lifestyle, nice house, nice cars, etc. How? Because Mary's affluent parents subsidized everything. They paid their mortgage, they paid for tuition, they regularly gifted them stock.
Which Lamar and Mary then invested wisely.
Nope. They immediately sold the stock gifts to buy new foreign luxury cars every 3 years.
Ah, so the EOC wasn't used for building assets. It was used for immediate high-status consumption.
Exactly. And that highlights the core psychological issue. EOC overwhelmingly encourages consumption, not saving or investing. The recipients start to suffer from what the researchers termed the montage effect.
The montage effect.
Yeah. They kind of lose the ability to clearly distinguish between their own earned money and their parents' capital. They start viewing their parents' wealth as an extension of their own personal income stream, something that's just there to be spent. It removes any real sense of financial urgency or personal accountability.
They become perpetually dependent, living off the parental balance sheet even if they have their own job.
That's the pattern. And the statistics back this up across different jobs. The study looked at 10 occupational categories, including high-status ones like lawyers and accountants. In 8 out of those 10 categories, adult children who received regular cash gifts had significantly smaller net worths and even lower annual incomes than their counterparts in the same jobs who didn't receive gifts.
8 out of 10, that's damning evidence against EOC.
It really suggests that the help is actually hindering long-term success. It conditions the recipients for dependence. It teaches them, subtly, that hard work and saving aren't strictly necessary because the parental safety net will always be there to catch them or subsidize their lifestyle.
There's an even more extreme example, isn't there? Ms. BPF.
Yes, Mrs. BPF. She received what the sources jokingly call economic inpatient care. She was an entrepreneur in her late 30s.
Okay, running her own business sounds independent.
Not quite. Her parents had financed her entire business. She lived at home, rent-free, and on top of that, they gave her a $60,000 annual personal allowance.
$60,000 allowance, free rent, and a funded business. She must have been saving a fortune.
You would think, but no. Despite having almost zero essential living costs covered, she demonstrated absolutely no financial discipline. She went out and bought a brand new $45,000 car without shopping around or negotiating. She bought a $5,000 watch. She was spending over $20,000 a year on clothes.
$20,000 on clothes while living rent-free.
And the worst part, she somehow managed to rack up over $7,000 in credit card interest in 1 year.
That's almost impossible to understand. How could someone with that much support get into credit card debt?
Because the fundamental muscle of financial self-discipline, the ability to delay gratification, to distinguish needs from wants, to shop for value, it had never been developed. It had atrophied because it was never needed. The parental money always flowed in.
And this dependence had a deeper cost, didn't it? Beyond just the money.
Profound cost.
Yeah.
Fear. Despite her incredibly cushioned life, Ms. BPF reported having 12 major fears about her future. Things like her business failing, her parents getting sick, their estate being heavily taxed.
12 major fears. How does that compare?
It was 4 times the number of major fears reported by the typical self-made, self-sustaining, affluent business owner in the study.
4 times the fear, despite having quadrupled the safety net.
Exactly. It's a powerful lesson. The struggle for financial self-sufficiency, the process of overcoming obstacles and managing risk yourself, that's what builds courage and resilience. EOC, by eliminating risk and struggle, paradoxically produces dependency and deep-seated anxiety. Okay, so we've covered the crucial defense frugality, planning, avoiding status traps, managing family EOC. But wealth isn't built purely on defense. PAWs also play exceptional offense, particularly in how they allocate their time and approach investments.
They treat their finances like a business that needs active management.
Precisely. And a key resource they manage strategically is their time. The difference in how much time PAWs versus UAWs dedicate to financial planning is stark.
How much time are we talking about?
For middle-income PAWs, the average was about 8.4 hours per month spent specifically on planning and managing their investments.
8.4 hours a month. Okay, about 2 hours a week. Seems reasonable.
Now, compare that to UAWs in the same income bracket. They spent, on average, only 4.6 hours per month.
Less than half the time.
Yeah, PAWs are spending roughly 83% more time actively engaged with their finances. It's not a huge number of absolute hours, maybe, but it represents a fundamentally different level of priority and engagement.
What are they actually doing during those 8.4 hours? Are they glued to stock tickers, day trading?
No, not usually. That time is spent on more strategic activities, reviewing investment performance, researching potential new investments, reading market analysis, maybe meeting with or vetting advisors, tax planning, basically, acting as the CFO of their household.
And their investment focus is different too, right? Not just chasing hot stocks.
Very different. PAWs focus on acquiring assets that tend to appreciate over the long term without necessarily generating a lot of realized taxable income each year.
Like what kind of assets?
Things like equity in their own privately held businesses, commercial real estate, maybe tax-deferred retirement accounts, growth stocks held for the long term. UAWs, on the other hand, tend to hold a larger proportion of their limited wealth in rapidly depreciating assets, like those expensive cars we talked about.
And the PAWs tend to stick to what they understand.
Absolutely. They exhibit what the sources call investment concentration. They don't try to be experts in everything. Remember Dr. North, our PAW physician?
Yeah, the one with the $7.5 million net worth.
His major investments were in things he knew well, stocks of other companies in the medical industry and agricultural land, likely because he understood land value. He wasn't chasing tech trends or crypto. He invested in areas where he had domain knowledge.
And he acted as his own advisor, mostly.
Largely, yes. PAWs are often their own primary financial advisors. This minimizes transaction fees and advisory costs, and crucially, it keeps them directly connected to their decisions. They avoid the temptation to constantly churn their portfolio based on someone else's hot tip.
Let's contrast that again with Dr. South, the high-income UAW doctor.
Right. Dr. South had less than $200,000 in securities investments, which is already low for his income. But even that small amount was spread across 4 different full-service brokerage firms.
4 brokers for less than $200.
Likely because he wasn't dedicating the time to manage it himself. He was outsourcing the thinking. And the cost was enormous. In just 1 year, he spent over $35,000 purely on advice fees and trading commissions for that small, poorly performing portfolio.
$35,000 in fees on a sub-$200K portfolio. That's insane. He was paying others to lose his money.
Essentially, yes. He was relying on advisors who, statistically speaking, were probably UAWs themselves, profiting from his inertia and lack of direct engagement. It highlights how critical it is to properly vet any financial help you do get.
Which brings us to that fantastic story about the Martin method for vetting brokers.
Mr. Martin, a great example of the PAW mindset in action. He became a multimillionaire primarily through stock investments, despite having a modest earned income of less than $75K a year.
Okay, so he clearly knew what he was doing with investments.
He did, and because he was wealthy, he got constant cold calls from brokers wanting to manage his money.
I bet. How did he handle them?
His method was simple, but brutal. When a broker called, he'd listen politely, and then ask them to send him copies of their personal federal income tax returns for the past 3 years, along with a detailed history of their own personal investment portfolio performance over the same period.
He asked for their personal tax returns and portfolio history. Seriously?
Seriously, and his follow-up line was classic. If you made more money from your investments over the last 3 years than I did from mine, I'll be happy to invest with you.
Wow. That shuts things down pretty quickly, I imagine.
Almost always. It
Wow.
completely flips the script.
Yeah.
It forces the advisor to prove their ability to actually build wealth, not just their ability to sell products or generate commissions. It's the ultimate demonstration of operating your household like a serious business demanding proof of performance.
And how did Mr. Martin actually find trustworthy advice when he needed it?
Not through cold calls, that's for sure. Like most PAWs, he relied on referrals from other trusted professionals, his accountant, maybe his lawyer, or other successful investors he knew personally. The vetting process was built on established trust and proven results, not slick marketing.
Okay, so strategic time allocation, focused investing, rigorous vetting. What about the offense of income generation itself? The choice of job or business?
That's the final piece. We already touched on self-employment being a major correlate of wealth.
Right, self-employed people are 4 times more likely to be millionaires.
Exactly. They control their own financial destiny. Their income potential isn't capped by a salary structure. They can manage expenses strategically, and they control their time.
And that dull normal advantage is key here too, isn't it?
Hugely important. The research consistently found that millionaire entrepreneurs were often not in glamorous, high-tech, or high-finance fields. They were the paving contractors, the welding shop owners, the pest control guys, the people who owned and managed apartment buildings or mobile home parks.
Why are those dull normal businesses so conducive to wealth building?
Several reasons. They often provide essential services, meaning stable demand even in downturns. They might attract less intense competition compared to sexier industries. And critically, as we discussed, they usually don't carry that heavy social burden of expectation to look rich. Nobody expects the owner of a janitorial service to drive a Ferrari.
It removes the pressure to maintain the big hat.
Precisely. It allows them to quietly accumulate the capital. And there's one more point about entrepreneurship. Risk.
Most people think starting a business is incredibly risky.
That's the common perception. But many of the successful entrepreneurs in the study argued the opposite. They felt that working for someone else, relying on a single employer for your entire income, was actually more risky.
More risky. How so?
Their logic was, if that one employer hits hard times or fires you, your income drops to zero overnight. As a business owner, even a small one, you might have dozens or hundreds of customers. Losing 1 or 2 isn't catastrophic. You have multiple diversified streams of revenue.
That's a completely different way of looking at risk. Diversification of income source, not just investments.
Exactly. The entrepreneur embraces calculated risk daily, learns to manage it, and builds resilience. The employee, they argued, faces a potentially larger, less controllable risk from a single point of failure. #HagBocheck outro. So, if we try to synthesize all of this, the single biggest takeaway message from these deep dives into wealth accumulation is crystal clear, I think. In America, it's actually much, much easier to earn a high income than it is to consistently accumulate substantial wealth.
Because our whole society pushes us towards consumption.
Exactly. The culture actively, almost aggressively, links high income with an expectation of high spending. You get the raise, you buy the bigger house or the fancier car. It leads directly into that UAW trap we talked about, even for very smart, high-earning people.
So escaping that trap requires playing really, really good defense.
Sophisticated defense. It means disciplined budgeting, meticulous planning, and maintaining a level of frugality that might even feel, well, socially awkward sometimes. That strong defense is what allows the offense, the income generation, to actually translate into lasting wealth on the balance sheet.
And the profile of the PAW, the prodigious accumulator, becomes really clear then. They consistently dedicate focused time and energy to activities that actually enhance their wealth. They consciously reject the status games and live demonstrably below their means.
They drive the older car, they live in the less pretentious house, they minimize that domestic overhead, and crucially, they prioritize genuine independence for their children, refusing to provide the kind of EOC that breeds consumption, dependence, and ultimately fear.
For them, money isn't primarily a tool for showing off right now. It's more like a report card, a measure of their discipline, their planning, their achievement over time.
Well put. And you see that discipline, that underlying courage in stories like Laura's. She was the real estate executive who won a Major Executive of the Year award.
Right, highly successful.
Highly successful. But even after achieving that level of success, she still deliberately chose to fly on discounted red-eye or early morning flights for business travel, simply because they were more economical.
Even when she could easily afford first class.
Easily. But her success story had roots in hardship. She'd built her career out of sheer necessity after her husband abruptly left her with little support. The sources conclude she succeeded because she literally had no alternative but to succeed. Her misfortune forged her purpose and her financial discipline.
That struggle developed her financial courage.
Exactly, and the sources define that courage perfectly. It's the mental or moral strength to resist opposition, danger, or hardship. In this context, it's the strength to choose long-term accumulation over short-term status, to choose frugality when society demands luxury.
So the final thought we want to leave you, the listener, is really a question for self-reflection, building on Laura's story and everything we've discussed.
If true financial independence requires developing that mental strength, that courage to resist the easy path of consumption and status,
what economic struggle are you currently embracing? What comfort are you consciously denying yourself right now? What financial risk are you actively managing, not avoiding? What societal expectation about spending or status are you deliberately resisting? Because that struggle, that resistance, might be the very thing strengthening your long-term financial courage and paving your path to becoming a PAW.
something to think about as you plan your own accumulation strategy.